In this video, we're going to talk about a topic that comes up far too often in online forums, FBOs, even flight schools. And the subject revolves around a simple misunderstanding of this concept. So we've got 5 flight instructors in a 172, and we all want to log pilot and command cross-country time. How do we go about that? All right. That's a little ridiculous, but it's kind of an example of the various scenarios that we see keep getting asked over and over and over and over. How do I log this is usually where that comes from. And the FAA hasn't helped because they've taken the term PIC, or pilot and command, and they've split it into 2 completely different concepts. Acting, who's in charge, and logging, which is simply the ink that goes in your logbook. And they are not the same. You will be sometimes logging pilot and command time when you can't act. You will be acting as pilot and command and logging. And there's times where you're acting as pilot and command, but you can't log anything. If you Google acting pick versus logging pick, or some variation, you get quite a few hits detailing pretty much everything I'm going to say in this video. And at the end of the video, I'm going to put up a little flow chart that someone else on the internet made. I didn't make it, but it documents kind of the flow of the various scenarios you might be needing to apply and the appropriate regs to determine, can I log PIC time or not? So let's first take a look at the acting side. That's a little more straightforward. Part 1 of the regs lists all the definitions that we need to know, and it defines pilot and command as the person who has the final authority of the flight. They're responsible for the safety of the flight. They've been designated as the pilot and command before or during the flight, and that's an important distinction. If you have 2 pilots in the airplane that are both capable of acting as pilot and command, you need to agree on who's actually going to be in charge. And the person acting needs to hold the appropriate category, class, and type rating, if appropriate, for the conduct of the flight. Regarding category and class, we're talking about, over here on the left, the airman side, category being airplane or glider, rotorcraft, and class being single-engine land, multi-engine sea, that sort of thing. 91.3 goes on to pretty much kind of repeat the pilot and command is responsible for and the final authority of the flight. It says that an in-flight emergency, the pilot and command may deviate from any rule to the extent required to meet that emergency, and that you may have to send a report in after the fact explaining why you deviated from the rules. So the acting pilot and command is simply the captain. They're the ones in charge, and there can only be 1 acting pilot and command on the flight at any given time. In addition to the category and class, you also need to meet all the other requirements of, I need to be current as far as my flight review. If I'm flying a high-performance aircraft, I need a high-performance endorsement, unless you're grandfathered in by having flown, or logged rather, high-performance time prior to August 4th of 1997. The same for complex time. So if you're going to carry passengers, have done your 3 takeoffs and landings within the 90 days as appropriate for day or night and that sort of thing. So if you meet all of those with your category and class, you can act as pilot and command. Has nothing to do with your logbook. This is just who's in charge of the plane. So with regards to the logging, let's take a look at that. That's where it gets a little more confusing. 6151, logging pilot and command flight time. The 3 typical areas that we have as GA pilots of when we get to log pilot and command time. We may not necessarily be acting. We might be, but we might not be. We can log pilot and command time when we're the sole manipulator of the controls for an aircraft for which the pilot is rated. And again, going back to rated, that's the category and class. Don't confuse that with an instrument rating or a high-performance endorsement. It doesn't say endorsements anywhere in this reg. When the pilot is the sole occupant in the aircraft, think student pilots. And the III there, when the pilot acts as pilot in command of an aircraft for which more than 1 pilot is required under the type certification of the aircraft, probably not the case for our little 172s, or the regulations under which the flight is conducted. Think safety pilot scenarios, which we're going to hit here in a second. Further down in 6151, a certificated flight instructor may log pilot and command time for all flight time while serving as the authorized instructor in operation, if the instructor is rated to act as pilot in command of that aircraft. So this is how CFIs build their time as going on to the airlines. They get to log pilot and command time anytime they're teaching, whether they were acting or not. When you're teaching a brand new student pilot, the CFI is obviously acting because somebody has to be in charge of the airplane and the student pilot can't do it quite yet. When the student pilot is soloing, that's where part 4 comes in. Student pilot may log pilot and command time only when the student pilot is the sole occupant, has the proper endorsements, and is undergoing training, and so on. So one of the main areas of confusion we get is when a pilot is getting, let's say, checked out in a high-performance aircraft or a retract, complex aircraft. So they don't yet have the endorsement. So while they're getting familiarized with the plane and putting some hours in their logbook, getting checked out in that airplane, they can still log pilot and command time because they're the sole manipulator of the controls for which they're rated. Let's assume it's a Piper Arrow, aircraft single engine land, and we're going to assume that's what's on your pilot certificate. You can most definitely log pilot and command time because you are rated for that type of plane. You can't act as pilot in command yet because you don't quite have the endorsement yet. The CFI that's checking you out is the one that's actually going to act as pilot in command. Same sort of scenario if a non-instrument rated pilot is working on their instrument rating and the CFI, takes the student up into, it doesn't matter whether it's in the clouds or if it's visual, but if they're operating on an instrument flight plan, they're operating under IFR, the student pilot can definitely log pilot and command time if the airplane is something for which they are rated, aircraft, single engine land, so on. If you're doing it in a multi-engine airplane and you don't have a multi-engine rating yet, then no, you cannot log that as pilot and command time. You're not rated for that. The CFII would definitely be the one acting as pilot and command time when operating under IFR because they have the rating. The student pilot, I hate to say student pilot, the instrument training pilot doesn't yet have the rating, so they can't act as pilot in command yet. So the CFI is the one acting. They're also getting to log pilot in command time from the reg we saw earlier. But the student, instrument student, definitely would get to log that pilot in command time as long as they're rated for that airplane. So even more fun are the safety pilot scenarios we mentioned earlier. There are many safety pilots that think they automatically get to log pilot and command time while they're being a safety pilot. That's not necessarily the case. So remember the 6151 E1 says that the pilot gets to log pilot and command time when they are acting as pilot in command. So now we're actually crossing the two terms together. When they're acting as pilot in command of an aircraft for which more than one crew member is required, or under the regulations for which the flight is conducted. And that's what our safety pilots are for in our little GA airplanes. As soon as the pilot flying puts on a pair of foggles or a view limiting device, 91-109 kicks in and we suddenly require a safety pilot, another crew member. If the pilot flying retains the responsibility of acting as pilot in command, then the best the safety pilot can do is log second in command time. So the pilot flying is still the sole manipulator, they're logging pick the whole entire time, and they've been acting as pick the whole entire time, assuming they are current to act as pick, flight review, currency of landings, because the safety pilot, when the foggles are off, they're not a safety pilot, they're a passenger. So there's an important distinction. Make sure that the pilot flying is current for carrying passengers, so that person in the right seat can, sometimes they're a safety pilot when the foggles are on, sometimes they're just a passenger when the foggles come off. If both pilots agree that while the pilot flying is under the foggles, that the safety pilot suddenly becomes the acting pilot in command, During that time, the safety pilot can then log pilot in command time. And again, only while the foggles are on, because as soon as the pilot flying takes their foggles off or their view limiting device, then we don't even need a safety pilot anymore. That person in the right seat, I'm saying right seat, it can be left or right seat. The safety pilot isn't a safety pilot. They just suddenly become a passenger, and now they're not able to log anything. So we've only covered a few scenarios that deal with logging and acting. Again, I'm not going to go through every possible scenario. I would definitely get them all wrong. But Google acting versus logging PIC time. Read up on the articles. Take a look at this flowchart I'm going to put up at the end of the video. And just the next time your flight instructor, when you're working on your instrument rating, says, no, you can't log that because you weren't acting as pilot in command, show them the flowchart or show them the regs, or have them back up their statement of why you can or can't log PIC time. Might be surprised. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, comments, or smart remarks, please put them in the comments. Thank you.